want you to stay seated. I do not want you to react. You say, well, you're going to train me poorly. No, I want you to treat this like a live action movie, right? You're just observing from a distance. You're in no harm. I just want you to observe from a distance, and then we're going to talk about some lessons learned afterward. But while my friend's going through with this high-powered Nerf gun, slinging rounds all over the room, I want you to think this to yourself while you're watching this live action movie unfold. What if this were real? What if this were real and bullets are tearing through bodies? What would I do? Where would I go? What would my reaction be? Because there's, coming out of your reptilian brain, right? Fight, flight, but what do 1/3 of humans do in a panic situation? They freeze, and they watch themselves get harmed. I don't want that to happen to you. I do not want that to happen to you. Okay? So just stay seated, don't react, no one jump up and kung fu karate chop my friend in the neck. You ready? Alan, activate.
Covering your face is certainly fine.
All right. How long did that take with his reload? 35 seconds. From here to there with a reload. Now, let's talk about this, right? This happens. This is a top fear for planners. When given a survey, what's your top fear? This always comes up to number one. So let's talk about this.
Come on up, Alan.
Come on up, Alan. Give Alan a round of applause. Alan's such a good sport. He did not hesitate. How many of y'all know Alan? If you don't know Alan, you need to know Alan. He's like the Liam Neeson of this field. He has a very particular set of skills. So what we want to do, right? We don't ever want this to happen, obviously. So we want to stay left of bang. We want to stay left of bang. And we don't have time to go into the entire active threat training block. That's something that I teach, and I love teaching it because it saves lives. I mean, I have a career in the military and in the law enforcement, and obviously I come from the training realm. I still, my day job is training those guys on how to do it. But every time I turn on the news and there's an active shooter event, an active threat event, they're not targeting the law enforcement community, they're targeting civilians. And the average civilian is just not trained on how to handle this, right? So we want to stay left of bang. And Alan, feel free to chip in whenever you want, brother.
Thank you.
We want to stay left of bang. And so very shortly, how do we do that? Number one, I want you to know the venue. What do we need to know about the venue? This is your physical domain. Yeah, and I don't care if you're going to a movie theater, you're going to church, you're going to synagogue, you're going out to eat with your family. I want you to know 2 ways to get out, right? 2 is 1 and 1 is none. If all you know is the 1 way to get out, something pops off. You go there and there's a guy with a Kalashnikov blocking that doorway. How many ways out do you have now? You have got to know 2 ways out of every place, right?
But I also, David, let me make a point too, and I don't want to criticize MPI at all, but let's look at the way this room is set. You guys in the middle here, there's no aisle here, right? How hard is it going to be for you guys to get out of this room set? And we're packed in here pretty good. It's going to be tough. It was tough to get into your seats, right? It'd be really tough to get out. So
How many exits do you actually see in here? 2. Which ones are actually doors that have open? That one here is closed. It's locked. It needs a key card to get through there. So you can't actually get out that way. I checked. I was going to come in that way with the gun. But
even to go out?
There's a button there, but it didn't work when I tried it.
Back here, you have a meeting venue, you can have an exit spot, right? During an event.
Hang on a second.
try, Sue. Break into the other
Let's get a
station,
microphone
Sue.
to you.
When I pushed the exit button, it says push to exit. I pushed it, and the doors would not open.
Fire alarm. fire alarm, it'll open.
But what if we needed to open because of an active shooter or something?
Fire alarm.
Sorry, from working in this building, if the alarm is going off, those doors will open, just from a lot of experience working in this building.
So we'd have to pull the fire alarm.
Yeah.
Is pulling the fire alarm what we want to do if there's a shooter in the building? Maybe.
It might freak them out. People are gonna start running.
You got a question, ma'am?
Well, first thing being, I don't think you are supposed to have the exits locked or locked.
If you have a live event, and also if a fire alarm goes off during an active shooter situation, that sends people running out, and could potentially put them right into the way of the shooter. Is that,
Yes.
so just some.
Your easy concern.
You're right. So we want to know the venue, but I don't want you to be limited by lack of creativity or lack of a door, right? If you are in a place where sometimes the way you came in is the way you go out, right? I want you to know that so you don't waste time and energy trying to do something else. And just know that the interior for most buildings in North America, you can make a door, right? The interior of most buildings are made out of what? Sheetrock, steel frame buildings with sheetrock. You can do a hasty breach, right? You can kick a leg off the table, rip something apart. If you have that door barricaded, you can make a little hobbit hole and clear a room out in under 5 minutes, right? Average space for rafters is either 18 or 24 inches. People can shimmy, shake in between those. So don't be limited by lack of creativity. If you're pretty nimble and agile, sheetrock can hold an adult male. You can punch as an option. You can punch handholds, footholds in there, make a ladder, walk up, remove the drop tile ceiling, and come down on the other side. If it's just you, or you want to send your kid out, that could be an option too, right? So just know that just because there's not a door doesn't mean you can't make a door, or doesn't mean you can't still get out of that building. We had several hands up over here.
I am a venue, so we did an active shooter training for our local police and FBI and shut down the streets and did everything. But because of that, as a precaution for all of my meeting planners that come in, I send them our evacuation plan along with a layout of all the exits for them to create their own plan. And so their staff, because my staff knows where everything is, but their staff needs to know. So I think it's important for meeting planners to have that. Like we do a pre-shift with all of my security, but my security doesn't necessarily know who their staff is. So I think it's meeting planners' responsibility to know the building and to ask for that.
Absolutely, because when something goes down like that, you are responsible for your own life. But I've been enough of these events to know that they count on you guys for everything, right? To where's the food, where's the ice machine, AV's not working. They count on you guys for everything. So if something like that happens and they don't know what to do, they're gonna do whatever you do.
Well, and I'm really glad to hear that you're giving that, because for a long time the pushback was we asked the facility for information about evacuation plans, and they said they couldn't give it to us for security reasons. And so
People don't ask for it.
well, that's true, but I'm really glad to hear that now there's some sharing going on, because it does better prepare everybody, and you certainly do, as David said, want them doing what you want them to do, and not them saying, well, as a planner, I created my own evacuation plan from your building, because that really doesn't work.
That's changing a little bit too. One of the issues when I'm talking to planners about creating a sites visit from a safety plan standpoint is when they're doing their room sets and going by and looking at rooms and looking at how the tables and whatnot can be set up. Also just look up and see where the emergency exits are, and just add that, so it's not as if they have to create a whole new plan, but one step they can do is just add that to the little checklist for when they're doing their site visits of how a room might be set up.
Ma'am.
You kind of already hit on it a little bit, but I have asked properties in the past to have their evacuation or their emergency preparedness plans, and I've always been told no. So that kind of leaves me as a loss as to what should happen should anything occur.
Well, and what I've always told planners to go back with is if they don't want to give you their whole evacuation plan, safety, security briefing, protocol, all of that, I get that. Like, I do get that. Like, because what better for somebody who does want to do nefarious things than to say, great, I have this plan. I'm going to plant one little incendiary device here to get everybody to evacuate. Then I'm going to plant the big one right in the evacuation path. Like, I do get that. So give us a scaled down version. Just, you know, give us something minimal so we know where to go. So something's better than nothing. Or at least tell us, like, for example, I was at the Fairmont York, where I'm staying again, some years ago at another conference, and they just told us, like, in case of an evacuation, this is where our staff will be, this is how they'll be dressed, and then you go to the train station and there'll be people with your last name on letters, and you go there and they'll have the registration kit, and like, that was enough to tell us where to go, where to be, and, you know, how we would know who got out and who didn't, and all of that. So
when the venue is not willing to share their stuff with you, or not share all of what you need, ask them certain questions like, if this event happens, what do I, as your client and meeting planner, do? Do you have a plan for that, and can you walk me through it? And then ask them specifically, what happens when there's a fire alarm? What happens if there's a weather event? What happens when the power goes out? Things like that.
And we want to maintain situational awareness. That's the human terrain, right? Because it's people that are hurting us. So we want to maintain situational awareness, how to read people, okay? And I'm going to briefly go over some cues that a human is going to put off if they are getting ready to do something bad. But you got to have a plan, because the mind navigates the body. The body will never follow where the mind is not willing to lead. So if the simple act of thinking about an active threat event or active shooter event makes you uncomfortable and your mind just doesn't want to go there, you got to take your mind there. Because if it happens and you're afraid to think about it, your reaction time is going to be very, very slow, and I do not want you to be 1/3 of the population that freezes and watches harm come to yourself. So here's just some cues. I'm going to run through these quick. The body's a pharmacy, right? People do things twice. They think about it, and then they actually do it. When they're thinking about it, there's going to be a hormonal response as they get amped up. And if you know what to look for, you can tell if someone's under emotional distress and they're trying to hide it. One is facial flushing, okay? Exactly what it sounds like. Blood's gonna come up profused. Sometimes you can see it, right? Top of the chest, neck, face will just go red if they're mad or if they're nervous or embarrassed. Paling is the exact opposite. Some people, they pale. The blood will drain out of their face and they'll just look, you know, pasty, pale, right? If they're facial flushing and it's a cool environment, right, that's a cue. If they're paling and it's a hot environment, that's a cue. Rapid breathing. Like rapid upper chest breathing, rapid blinking. The average blink rate for people is about 12 times per minute, right? When people are under duress, that can go up to like 60 times. It can almost be like 1 per second. When they teach this, because that's also someone who's under emotional distress and they're trying to conceal the truth, right? That's one of the things that investigators look for. Do you know what video they use all around the world to show as an example of this man's lying and look at how fast he's blinking? You know what video they use all around the world? Bill Clinton, right? When Bill Clinton was getting interviewed about Monica Lewinsky, and it was like his eyelids were going like a soda machine. It's insane. Like, you couldn't blink that fast if you tried. Increased swallowing, they get cotton mouth. Body grooming. Body grooming is what we call when someone is carrying a weapon concealed on their person and they're not used to do it, and unconsciously their hands are going to where it is to making sure it's there, right? Number one weapon used for active shooter events is a pistol. Where do you think someone's going to conceal a pistol? Most people are right-handed. They're gonna, it's gonna be right side of the body, tucked in the waistband. So their hand will go down, just, they just can't stop checking, right? Checking their six, what's that mean? The average person doesn't walk around and go like this. Right? Because they know they're up to no good, and they're like, does anyone see my dastardly deeds? Does anybody know? Pacifying behaviors. They're nervous, they're trying to physically comfort themselves as if they're a child. They're getting goose, hair follicles are raising up, they're trying to soothe themselves, they're rubbing their neck, they're rubbing their legs because they're nervous, and they're trying to soothe themselves. nervous pacing back and forth. They have nervous energy, adrenaline, cortisol produced in anticipation of doing the crime of violence, and they got to burn it off. This is a big one, right? Fixed stare, what we call the predator stance. Stone cold look, no expression. You know, this is hospitality, right? Everyone here is laughing, having a good time. Someone walks in without an ID badge showing some of these stone cold fixed stare. Do not disregard that person. Do not disregard that person. Barricading, right? Just some very quick ways. Improvised door denial. If you have to block a door, here's some common ways to do it with belt, right? Don't be limited by imagination. You can do it with a belt like this. Or here's some manufactured ones that we see more and more in the United States. You see these in a lot of schools. Maybe some of your event halls have them, and they'll be...
For the ladies, your purse straps.
Yeah.
If you're not wearing a belt, you can use your purse straps to do that.